Welcome to B2B Commerce Corner. Commerce Corner is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast discussing all things B2B commerce through the lens of agencies, consultants, merchants, and more. Enjoy. To another episode of The Pod with my amazing friend, colleague, partner in crime, co-host, Mr. Graham Luby from Wasserman Digital. Thank you so much for joining me again, Graham.
Good to be here, Jason.
It's awesome to have you along for the ride with me today on this beautiful Friday afternoon. I don't know what it's like in Miami today, but I'm looking out my terrace window here through my office door, and it's about 25 C out there. It's beautiful, sun shining, clear day. We've had some stunning weather the last few days, and we've been very fortunate with the weather since I got back from Melbourne last week.
Yeah, nice. I'm actually in New Jersey on the shore for a few weeks, but it's pretty beautiful here too. No,
Nice. Yeah, exactly. I think because you can be. Well, what's like the temperature like this time of the year in New Jersey?
like in the low 80s, high 70s. It's cool.
Beautiful weather.
Really awesome, man.
Love it. I absolutely love it. Listen, this is episode 3 in our master series. And what we've been talking about really is all about voice of the B2B buyer. How can we know what our customers want and need if we're not asking the right questions? Effectively, what these 3 episodes have been focused on is customer centricity, because we have so many manufacturers and distributors that say, oh, we're customer centric. Oh, we have amazing account management. Oh, we do all these amazing things for our customers. We will bring in and procure special products for them and create special catalogs, and we'll do all these things. But oftentimes, what made us great a decade ago or 20 years ago or 2 generations ago isn't the thing that's going to make us great in our customers' minds today. And it's really interesting. So we went off on a little bit of an AI tangent on the last episode that we hadn't planned to go down, which is just fine. That's exactly what these master series are all about. Is it's a little bit of a seat of the pants thing. We have a rough outline that we follow, but we always leave room for flexibility to go down something that's topical and relevant as of right now when we record. But what I find interesting is that sometimes what we think is important to our customers, or certainly what is important to us as a business and as a supplier, is oftentimes not what is most important to the customer. And I remember I was running a customer interview on behalf of one of my distribution clients, and we were talking about this potential new e-commerce project that we were going to do and what we were going to build and all the functionality it was going to bring to the table. And I asked them the question, do you think this would be valuable to you? If we built this e-commerce thing so that you could transact online in a self-service way, would that be important to you? Would that be valuable to you? And they said, no, not really. I really enjoy my account manager. We have a great relationship. I've been working with them for a decade. And so, I don't know if we would use it. And then I got a little bit more granular and I started asking them other questions about, okay, what are the 1, 2, 3 things you love about doing business with a supplier? What are the 1, 2, 3 things that you are challenging about doing business with the supplier? Since you've been a customer of theirs for so long, you'll know the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'd like to hear a little bit of the ugly. And what's that? And one of the things that they brought up was very unexpected by the distributor. And that was, they said, look, we never know when our order is going to arrive. And we order like containers of goods from this distributor. We ordered like between 20 and 40-foot containers when we order. And when their orders arrive into our receiving dock, it blocks up a bay in our receiving dock. We don't have room for it. And I need to schedule my receipting team to be able to de-van their orders and get them into our warehouse before we can then sell them on to our customers. And we never know when they're going to arrive. They don't tell us when the order shipped. We don't have a tracking number. We have no easy way of knowing a prospective date when it's likely to hit our loading dock. And therefore, I don't ever have the teams ready. And so usually a container will sit there between 1 and 3 days before we have the manpower to de-van it and get it into our warehouse, which not only is a problem for our receiving area, but it's also a problem because that delays the time that we can actually get these problem products into our customers' hands as well. And the supplier was like, wow, we didn't think that was like a deal. We didn't realize that was such the problem that it was. And and I said, did you ever raise that with your account manager? I said, did you ever talk to them about that? And they said, we have to work with our account manager every single day, and we don't really want to harm the relationship. So they're a little bit cautious about the things that they say or the things that they complain about, because they don't want that to hurt the relationship. They gotta get on the phone with their account manager and request a quote the very next day. And so there's this tension there between what a customer wants and what they're willing to share with their suppliers that they think may harm the relationship. They might want a list of 50 things, but they'll be very cautious in what they share because they know that this is
Mm.
all built on a long-term relationship model. And so they said, look, we didn't even know this was a problem. We didn't even know this was a challenge. And they said, what we'll sometimes do is we'll ask Bob, our account manager. I've changed the names for privacy purposes. We'll sometimes email them and we'll say, hey, look, do you have any idea? Do you have a tracking number? Do you have these details? Can you give us an idea of when this thing is going to arrive? If we remember to do that, if we remember to ask the question. And I think this is the challenge. And then they usually have to wait for a 1 to 3 day turnaround time for the account manager to be able to go to the carrier or be able to go to their procurement team. And it's just this. But I said all that to say that was a long-winded way of saying sometimes what we think is the most critical thing or the most important thing to our customer just isn't. And the things we think aren't important are important to them, but we won't know unless we ask. And sometimes we won't know unless we have a third party ask, an impartial, neutral third party that can help stand in the gap and ask the hard questions that we are either incapable or afraid to ask and hear the answers for. And that's, I think, what we, in a nutshell, have uncovered over the last couple of conversations is how do we operationalize creating a feedback loop with our customers that gives them the safe space to be able to say the things that maybe are uncomfortable to be said.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary. And it's easier said than done, right? You need to, number one, have the third party that has industry knowledge. And number two, get into a cadence of asking your customers. And what we found is that the different customers at different levels in the organization or different roles in the organization are going to have different feedback. It's the marketing person that says, oh my God, I really wish you would give me data in a certain format because then I can import it into my PIM and into my end systems. Whereas the operations manager doesn't care about that at all. They
Yes.
care about inventory availability and delivery dates and such. So yeah, it's asking those questions, but also asking them at different levels in the organization, I think are really important. And to get to that, having a structured voice of the customer program is super valuable with specific roles, with specific targets, a cadence of doing that sort of feedback, and then a way to be able to get that feedback summarized, show changes over time, and then also present them out into an organization because often the feedback's going to drive requests for new information, new features, new capabilities, new ways of doing things that the organization will likely have to invest in. So taking your example of being able to provide more accurate shipping information, it shouldn't be a salesperson tracking that down from a carrier. Or a freight forwarder. It should be systematically showing up in your systems and then being distributed out to the end customer so that they can plan accordingly and have a tighter integrated supply chain.
Yeah, and I think that also is going to become much more critical in the coming rapidly approaching agentic AI era, where agentic procurement systems are going to be asking these questions on behalf of the humans on the buy side, and
Yeah.
they're going to be asking those questions agentically. They're not going to be sending an email to the account manager. They're going to be querying some system somewhere, ideally, probably through some sort of an MCP server that can furnish this data in a meaningful way to the buyer so that their agentic systems, as they're going through their workflows, because they'll have an internal workflow as part of the procurement process, which says, okay, 3 days after order, send an agentic request to find out when is the likely shipment date, when is the likely arrival date, all availability to fulfill, all that information to revalidate orders and shipments and prices and all those things and even inventory availability across an existing order that's been received, but
Yeah.
maybe hasn't been fully updated. I think if we don't have some form of automation in there, this is going to be a pretty heavy lift for suppliers of the future. It already is a pretty heavy lift for these, which is why they just don't do it.
And I would maybe turn things on their head there. Instead of the buyer having to query the status of a shipment, the seller should be able to, their agents, monitor where those shipments are and send the information as soon as they have it. And then any exceptions and updates sent along downstream. It's actually amazing how things come around. I co-founded a software company that worked with a lot of the large brands, Williams-Sonoma and Sharp Electronics and a few others, to be able to get their EDI transactions across the whole supply chain. So from when their ERP first sent an order to a supplier, to the factory, to the freight forwarder, onto the ocean thing, through customs, the truck movements. Essentially, for taking all of these EDI orders and EDI transactions and files, consolidating them into this supply chain view, similar to what with FedEx, you can see where you're packaging along the way. On a lot of the bulk international, that all happens across carrier. You don't have the closed network. Well, FedEx, you've got this multimodal network. And what we were doing was, as one of the first SaaS solutions in logistics to do it, was to consolidate that information so we could give the end customer that visibility. That's pretty wild. Like 20 plus years later, it's still a problem.
Yeah, because things like bills of lading, they haven't changed much over the last 50 years.
150s.
Yeah, back to the schooner days. The bills of lading were a thing, right? And it was a physical paper document. And still on the outside of containers, there'll be that sleeve for the bill of lading. It's wild how the international shipping industry still is physical document driven, and to turn those into a scanned EDI message effectively. That level of automation is massive for the global logistics industry. And now if we start, just change gears a little bit here, we wanted to talk a little bit more about from strategy to execution. So in the previous couple of episodes, we have talked about what are the business benefits of creating a real strong voice of customer model, process, insights, actions, pipeline. We've talked about like the justifications for that. We've tried to help build the business case for this, of how it creates tighter relationships, how it creates higher AOVs, how it creates higher LTVs, how it creates massive customer stickiness over time, where even in a B2B world where there's kind of natural stickiness built in, if I have two distributors, if I'm a B2B buyer and I have two distributors that are selling effectively the same products at effectively the same price, and what would make me choose one supplier over another supplier routinely in the B2B world? And it's oftentimes the experience part. Do I get a great experience with one, and do I get a very average experience with the other? I'm going to go with one that gives me a great experience. I'm going to go with the one that I've got an account manager that I have a great relationship with. I'm going to go to the one that has the best website experience, and I can easily find the products that I need, and I can easily buy them, and I can easily set up my credit account and maintain it and monitor it and see where I'm at with the status of my credit account and all the rest of the things that I want to do. The easier one. We're all about ease of use here in the modern world. Everybody's used to an Amazon world. They're used to a Temu world. They're used to these ease of use consumer websites. And so they expect that and all of the additional B2B functionality piled on top. And so we gave this sort of business case justification for investing in these cycles of customer feedback and iteration as a business. But what we want to do is we want to take that one step further. We want to say, okay, that's great. We got the strategy. We've justified it. The board's bought in. We think we have the process roughly mapped out, the customer journey process mapped out as it relates to this customer centricity focus that we have as a business. But then we want to go into execution, and we want to make these changes stick, because what is it they say? The best intentions of mice and men, right? And so the reality is we might have the best intentions. We might even have the funding. We might even have the customer cohorts and the segmentation that we want to do, because the types of questions we would ask one customer segment might be very different to the types of questions we ask to another customer segment. And I was working with a client recently where they were helping me do their re-tiering of their partner program. And they sell tint films and paint protection films and even commercial building tint films and a whole bunch of other things. And they sell primarily to dealers who are doing the installs of these products. And historically, they never ever had tiers. They just had one trade price, and they just had tiered pricing on a per product level. Okay, you order a roll, you get this price. You order 10 rolls, you get this price. You order a box, you get this price, right? But they never had the idea or the concept in their business of tiers, where a weekend warrior who's doing this as a side hustle, it has very different needs, quite apart from pricing and quite apart from product. They have very different needs of support than shop that has 5 physical stores, plus they got 10 on the road vehicles. So they do mobile installations, plus they do in-shop installations, and they got 100 staff. It's a very different set of engagement requirements that they need, quite apart from price. And so what they did is they wanted help to try to identify these different cohorts across their customer base, get feedback from those cohorts about the key things that would really help them at their stage of business. Okay, is it training both on site and in the supplier's site? Is it, oh, cool, we're going to be at SEMA this year. Do we want to co-present and do we want to have a booth together where we're presenting product, you're presenting services, and maybe we even do some application of product on site? Okay, cool. Do we, at certain levels, do we want to do joint marketing together? Do we need a Discord server for all of our dealers to be able to talk to each other and share information and share opportunities that they can't fulfill? One customer, we were doing customer interviews, and one customer said, you know what I'd like to see? I would like to see an annual conference because I'd like to get together with all my peers, and then I would like to see the awards because there were certifications they were going to introduce as they moved up through the dealer tiers. They would get different levels of certification depending on how many trained installers they had with that product on staff. And so they wanted to give them like plaques and wall hangings and things for point of sale, et cetera. And they said, but this one, and this was a completely new idea. One of these partners said, why don't you do an annual conference that we can all come to? We can share ideas. We can have awards given on stage. We can take photos. This is great content for social. And it gives us credibility in the industry when we won awards from our key friggin' supplier of the product that we install. And it pumps us up. It gets us excited. It makes us proud of what we do. And maybe these could be regional awards even. And so it was such a refreshing thing when you open up the floor and you say, we're thinking of doing this to recognize you uniquely where you are in your journey with us as a partner. We want to recognize that. And we want to give you the appropriate support all along your buying journey with us and your growth journey with us, lead generation and all that sort of stuff. And again, I've been talking a lot here, but it's super interesting the kind of feedback you will get back from your customers if you give them the forum to do.
100% agree with you. Very often I find that when we have conversations like one-on-one with customers, or when a manufacturer speaks to their distributors, it's the same people speaking to each other repeatedly, right? It's the same rep having the same conversation with an end customer when the relationship actually touches a lot of other people along. So if you don't have that opening the floor up to your customers, and maybe not just the people you work with all the time, but the ones in the organization, you get to hear a lot of other points of view. And I think it gives you a lot of ideas on how to serve it. I think the days of just being purely price-based are numbered, because you have to have a scale to win in a price-based world, and you have to have the logistics behind you. I think that goes to Amazon. Like, they're the scale and the logistics leader. You've got outrangers that are doing a really good job building up their footprints, and they've got physical locations. For other B2B distributors and players in the space, I think there has to be something beyond just lowest offer. There has to be convenience. There has to be interconnected systems. There have to be rewards programs. So to get to what is important for the end, you have to ask them, and you have to be able to take that feedback at scale and use it to your requirements, and then put your bets on, here's where we're going to invest to really provide the kind of what they're looking for. And that implementation process, I've seen works best when you come up with an idea, test with those customers. You then go into a beta, test it out, evolve, refine, and then do a full rollout. It's not a quick process.
No.
But it's, I think, a very valuable process. And you've always got a roadmap that you're constantly evolving, updating against to get consistently better. And that when we look at and benchmark against leaders in the space, they don't stop evolving and offering, whether it's their online offering, the suite offering, their pricing, their delivery commitments, their communications. They're constantly improving it. Get the site done. It's get the site up, get feedback from your customers. and incorporate it, and incorporate their feedback into how you can.
And I guess we can then, as a result of what you just said, we can think of that customer centricity effort as being a program of work instead of just a project at one point in time, similar to how we wouldn't treat, well, ideally, we wouldn't treat an e-commerce build as just a once in a lifetime or once in a decade or once in 5 years project. It's a program of work. It's a never ending program of work that, sure, maybe up front there's a little bit of a heavier lift and maybe there's a little bit heavier of an investment up front to get you to
Yeah.
that minimum standard of quality and capability, but it doesn't end. And it's a program of work that has to become sustainably funded and sustainably resourced inside the business for the long term. It has to be treated with the same care, consideration, love, empathy that you would building out your sales team and creating those relationships with the customer. Everything else that we do has to be treated with that same level of respect and appreciation. And so I think what you're saying is, in the same way we treat digital projects as programs of work and we roadmap that out, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 10, we should be looking at customer centricity as a program of work. That, hey, look, maybe there's a heavy lift up front. Maybe we set up some NPS systems. Maybe we set up some polling systems. Maybe we set up some quarterly reviews, right? Maybe we set up these things, and that maybe that's a little bit of a heavy lift in the beginning, but we know that this has to be operationalized and systematized so that it just continues to happen forever. That this is not a fire and forget thing. You have to be dedicated to this if you want it to become reality that sticks in the business, right?
100%. Yeah. You have to build out that capability with the tools and a way to collect the data, analyze the data, and then present it back to the business. So the business can use that information ongoing to refine how they go to market.
And and I know you guys have developed a bit of a custom framework for this for your clients. Do you find that this should actually begin long before a new digital project, let's say it's a rebuild or replatform or a massive update to digital systems? Do you think that customer centricity framework and all of the tasks and activities that drop out of that, do you think that should begin long before we ever think of a major digital rollout? That should begin then, or should it begin after we're live?
I would lean towards beforehand. The team's able to set their strategy, but that strategy is inputs both internally from customers and from market projections and dynamics, right? So you're getting the different stakeholders to help inform your project or your initiative. And once you've gone live, making sure that they are able to continue to give you feedback on how you want to evolve your roadmap. But yeah, the sooner you get, you ask your customers what they want, this right? So you want to make sure that your investment in a new system or a new project is going to meet their need, not what you think they want. I told you they want.
Yeah, and I find that oftentimes when you ask more open-ended questions, the more frame of creative thinking comes into the customer's mind, versus if you just say, here's 10 ideas we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is what we're looking at doing. What do you think of those 10 things? If you make it a little bit more open-ended and you do ask those questions like, look, we are looking at making some serious investment in our digital capabilities to serve you better. Help us make sure that this is as relevant as it can be for you. Maybe you don't even mention the word digital, because oftentimes, even using the term digital or the term e-commerce or the term portal oftentimes sets a preconceived idea of what they think can be delivered digitally, because they don't know, right? They don't necessarily know what can be delivered digitally. And so maybe the better question is simply to say, what is difficult about doing business with us? What is great about doing business with us? We'll definitely continue to do that. And we'll definitely try to continue to double down on those things that make us awesome to you and double down on the things that you love us for. But what are the things that either are we could do better from your perspective, or What are some of the things that some of your other suppliers do amazingly well that we do not do? That if we started doing things that way, would make your life so much better that we would continue to be an absolute no-brainer choice to be your supplier.
I
What
love that
what are the
question.
types of frameworks you've
I love
developed for
that
that?
question. I love that question to start with because it allows you to see where you are compared to your competitors, right? What's the gap between where I am and where the best in breed that this customer is working with? It doesn't mean that's the level that you want to shoot for, but that's the minimum level you need to meet. It then means you can identify, is there white space for you to create a differential offering against that competitor? I love that sort of question because it is open-ended. It's not just a survey saying, hey, would you recommend us as a supplier? It opens up for their view. And probably 10 years ago, we did a survey for a large legal company that sells they're a manufacturer, electrical and HVAC equipment. They're global. We're working with the US team from their distributors, what the distributors were looking for. And this company's got a lot of different product lines. And marketing, and the goal was to look at very large ones, but as well as some definitely different feedback. We saw a lot of consistency within the roles. So somebody in marketing wants good product data. They want it timely. They want to be able to understand what quotients are going on. That doesn't matter whether it's very big or very small. They want to be consistent in that fashion. It really helped inform the client, drive their portal strategy going forward. Funny enough, the same answers that they gave us and asked for, we hear constantly in the market today. It happens to be that client was pretty digitally mature, and over the last decade, they've evolved their capabilities. There are a lot of companies that are where they were 10 years ago. And I suppose they're asking for the exact same thing. You're right.
And do you also find that obviously what is scalable on a small scale isn't necessarily scalable on a big scale? Let me explain what I mean by that. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but obviously if I've got 1,000 B2B customers, I won't necessarily be able to do 30-minute customer interviews with all 1,000 of them, at least definitely not on a regular basis. But what I can do is I can maybe select a couple of customers from each of those major cohorts, however you decide to break them down, whether it be by size, scale, role type, whatever it might be. And maybe I can interview, I don't know, 10 or 20 customers max out of that 1,000, but it doesn't mean that I don't want to get any feedback from the rest of the 1,000. So maybe I say, look, for this cohort of 20 customers, I'm going to do customer interviews with them. But for the remaining 980 customers, we're going to send we're going to send a questionnaire out to them digitally, right? Maybe we won't get the level of response or the conversion rate to response that we would if we rang them up and said, hey, I'd love to get you on a 30-minute phone call to give us your feedback and ideas. Usually that converts pretty well because people love to be able to voice their feedback, especially when they feel like they're special in that regard. But even if you only had 50% conversion rate to feedback of that additional 980, that is still quantitative feedback at scale that even if all it does is further add validation to the 20 interview levels of
Yeah.
feedback that you've gotten. So do you oftentimes see that kind of situation where they say, look, we can't do the level of qualitative feedback solicitation that we would like to do across our entire customer base, just too big, but we do want to do quant feedback at scale across absolutely everybody?
Absolutely. And initially it's the qualitative to really understand what people are asking for, then taking that information and turn it into a quantitative survey where you're able to figure out is what you heard from that subgroup statistically relevant, significant to actually base decisions on. Something that I found though, and consistently, it's really tough to get people to commit to a half hour into.
Yeah.
When we do these programs, a lot of time is spent recruiting participants, incenting them to actually partake and doing the actual interviews After that, you got your write-up, and they can be streamlined a lot with AI and to be able to pull out nuggets of information. Just the logistics of making them happen takes a lot of effort.
It doesn't, but what I find is I've scheduled all the way from 10-minute customer interviews all the way to 40-minute plus customer interviews, and I found the sweet spot to be about 30 minutes, mainly because by the time you do a 5 minutes of introductions and setting the groundwork and saying, "Why are we here?" and the kind of information we're trying to collect and why we want you to be partake in this and all that sort of stuff, you've burnt through 5 or 10 minutes to begin with. So if you only set a 15-minute interview, then you got 5 minutes to ask questions. I find that 30 minutes gives you enough time to ask and have answered some really good suite of maybe 5 questions and then a few follow-ups to those 5 questions. But you go much longer than that, and your decline rate goes through the roof. So if you try to say 40 minutes or 45 minutes, like almost no one will say yes to that, but most people will entertain a 30-minute interview session.
Yes, and did you offer incentives to get people to actually show up?
I haven't had to yet, but I think that would be super valuable, especially where I think a really well-established I think there are certain scenarios where incentives would be required, for sure. I can think of scenarios where that would be required. Luckily, with none of my customer interviews so far have we had to incentivize them. And we've had enough people that wanted to voice their opinion and vocally, and they felt like, okay, here's my chance. I'm gonna sure as hell make my voice heard. Okay, you asked, so I'm gonna be honest and be prepared to have some thick skin, especially if you're asking questions. And I suppose that's the other benefit of having third parties to assist in this process is that it's not going to hurt my feelings. I'm not an employee of this company. It's not my company. I don't own it. And so I can be a little bit more impartial in the feedback that I get. And then what we can do is we can sanitize, we can bucketize, we can turn this into themes and a report that is still really transparent about the areas that we see consistently falling short for the customer, but maybe they don't have to hear it as piercingly as being on the call. You would have that pointed at you pretty sharply.
I will say that doing the surveys, conducting them, analyzing them, summarizing them has become a lot easier with AI recording.
I could not agree more. I tell you, with Fathom and Otter and all the rest of the Read AI and all the rest, man,
Yeah.
I tell you, not having to take notes and being able to just have a free flow of conversation, and you've got the digital note taker in the background, that has made this process so much better.
Without a doubt. In speaking to our teams that do these regularly, they're able to compress the amount of time it takes to summarize notes and pull out relevant survey questions because of it. It's pretty cool.
It is freaking awesome. Could not agree. What I'd like to see is the next level where these AI note takers, you can go into a dashboard where you can click 5 different meetings and say, pull out unified themes across multiple meetings. Give me basically a meta summary of all of these and bring out the common out. Like, I think that's the next generation of these tools. What do you think?
We're starting to do something similar for our project managers, where our project managers record all meetings. Those
Yes.
recordings and files go into a body of knowledge.
Yes.
We look at hundreds of meetings held on a regular basis, being able to put those into a consolidated data set that AI can then analyze and pull out trends, themes, suggestions, reviews is super valuable because you then have enough data to start building nurturing capability for project managers. Early days, but it's something that we're looking at doing and have done some initial work on it to be able to get that information. With the goal of us constantly providing better service to our customer. And
I love that. And when you go in for the first time with these businesses and you apply this new, it may not be new, but it's certainly a new evolution of your customer centricity framework. Where do you start? Like, because every business is going to be at a slightly different point in their journey towards customer centricity. They may have some systems, they may have some processes in place. Maybe they're inconsistent with enforcing them. Maybe they're inconsistent in the way that they apply the insights or even identify the insights. But maybe they have something in place. Maybe they have absolutely nothing in place apart from maybe the seat of the pants feedback from account managers or sales directors, BDMs, BDRs, etc. Where do you usually begin with your conversation with your clients about getting them on board with the idea of customer centricity, getting them on board with the idea, okay, we need to put a process in place around this. We need to operationalize this in a meaningful way. Otherwise, it will never stick inside the business. So, do you have to sell this idea into them? Or usually when they come to you, are they already in the mindset of, we're going to go through this massive digital transformation project. We better do this in a customer centric way. Otherwise, we're going to get no ROI out of this project anyway. So, are they already in a good headspace for you to come in and say, "We need to help you become more customer centric"?
I think it depends on where they are in their transformation. If they already have a really solid vision and the next phase is the blocking and tackling of bringing that vision to reality, you've maybe less opportunity to hear from the customer. They know where they want to go. They know the requirements. You're there to help deliver them. If they're still refining their vision and refining the strategy, then you've got a much better opportunity to have different paths, gather requirements internally. The other path being gather requirements externally from your customer. And that sets up the opportunity to start hearing from customers. And then from there, it's the next step is having a more regular feedback. When we've presented findings to board of directors, there's a lot of, wow, that's really interesting. I didn't think that was an important topic for us to address. So it's very often, I think, senior execs get caught in this, our customers just want things lower priced. And that's not true, right? It's, they hear about the negotiations and the price pressure. They don't necessarily hear about the service expectations and streamlining the channel relationships.
It's super interesting you say that. So, I'm working on a project right now, and I'll give you 2 examples of this, and I'd love your take on this. Sometimes there's 2 very different types of customer feedback we need to get. So, I'm working with a platform vendor right now. So, their customers, technically the merchants who are buying their software, but they also work and deliver their solutions via partners. So by agency partners like Wasserman Digital, for example. So when we're doing customer interviews for qualitative feedback, there's 2 types of customers we need to interview. It was the SI partners who are implementing their technology out there in the market, trying to win deals and partnerships and opportunities and events and all that sort of stuff. But then we also needed to talk to existing customers of the platform who are paying for the platform and how they're using it on a daily basis. What could be improved? What's great about
Mhm.
it? What's great about engaging with the vendor? What's not so great about engaging with the vendor? So there's 2 different groups we needed to interview there. But we can think of them as different stakeholders, but they have very different views and very different feedback depending on how they're engaging with that supplier. And I find it the same. I'm working with a massive manufacturer right now in the US, and one of the things, it's interesting because there was a very late stage requirement that came into a project where they wanted the ability at checkout to be able to put not only their PO number, but their customer's PO number in the order so that they could cross-reference it when it comes in to the billing system and the reconciliation system. Now we've got a direct connection between our PO number and our customer's PO number so that we can back to back the invoicing to our customer on those POs, right? Now, that never came up during the initial scoping exercise. And they had done a lot of customer interviews at that point. We had done a lot of customer interviews at that point, but that never came up as a requirement. And so now we've gotten to UAT and they're going, oh, hang on a second. Our customers have told us that it would be really handy if they could have not just their PO, but their customer's PO, and that could flow right through to the invoicing and beyond. And I was like, wow, okay, how did we miss that? Like, how did we miss that as a requirement? Because now they've got to create a new field in their ERP. We've got to update the system integration. We've got to integrate. We've got to update the checkout UI. We've got to capture the data. We've got to add it to the order object. It's not a massive piece of work, but it's not insignificant in terms of the updates because we got to update the commerce platform, the ERP, and the system integration to make this work properly end to end. But it's like, how did we miss that in those initial customers. This never came up, but sometimes until you see something in the flesh, so to speak, it's hard to completely visualize all the ways in which this thing could be made better.
Yeah.
And do you see that as well?
And I think the example that what is probably relevant with the Windows film companies, distributors, as well as installers, and being able
Yeah.
to understand how they can best serve customer is a great way of loyalty with the person actually putting down the credit card.
Yes. It's amazing. I tell you, I think if I was to wrap everything we've discussed for nearly 3 hours now in total, I think if I was to wrap this in one central theme or topic or word, it would be empathy. That is the single most important thing that I think in terms of a muscle that us as manufacturers and distributors could exercise inside the business is to always think through the lens of empathy. Our customers have jobs to be done. They've got roles to do. They got bosses to impress. They want to climb the corporate ladder themselves. They want to make their mark. They want to do a great job. They want to make their customers happy. There's so many agendas at play here. And as someone moves throughout their career, their agendas change and their focus changes as well. And so the answer that they might give you today might be very different 6 months from now, which might be very different to 6 months after that. And that's why having a continuous improvement, a continuous customer feedback, a continuous customer-centric mindset and heart set in the business. It's not just a mindset, it's a heart set. Empathy comes from in here. Empathy doesn't come from here. Empathy comes from here. If I can walk a mile in your shoes and I can feel your pain every single day from the poor bastard, for example, working in the warehouse department who's got to deal with this crap turning up at his doorstep and he doesn't have a team to deal with it, and it makes him look bad and his KPIs look bad, then man, if we have empathy for that, then we would want to make his or her life better and take away that pain. So I think for me, this all comes down to empathy and operationalizing empathy in the business. It sounds easy when you say it fast, but man, is it hard to do.
That it is.
And as we move forward, we've got just a few minutes left here in our session. What do you think about the adoption rate of customers of our digital solutions? And we did identify this as a key point right in the very first episode, but I'd like to dig into this a little bit further. So there's two kind of schools of thought here, and I think the truth probably, as always, falls somewhere in the middle, which is, okay, cool. We want to create an adoption plan for our customers as early as possible, want to make the solution as relevant as possible for them so it becomes a no-brainer for them to adopt our digital technology and solutions. We want to create a roadmap of training, onboarding, maybe even incentivization, et cetera, for our customers to use these digital technologies. But then there's the other side of the coin, which says, okay, great. Why don't we simply implement solutions that don't require them to change their behavior at all to get the benefit of our digital technologies and for us to get the efficiency out of our digital technologies? And so there's platforms like Motivate, and some of the main e-commerce platforms out there now have Salesforce automation built into the platform where, for example, they can take an email that has a PDF PO attached or a CSV PO attached. They can strip that out with it's historically, an account manager would do that. They'd download the email, they'd strip out the attachment, they would key the order into the ERP, they'd attach the PO to the order in the ERP, and Bob's your uncle. Nowadays, with these middleware tools, with these automation tools, we now can turn these traditional communication channels, email, WhatsApp, Slack, Teams, we can now turn these effectively into headless commerce channels where they can request pricing, they can request inventory, they can do effectively a product search, they can attach POs to those communications, and we can treat those as headless commerce channels, and we can service them in an automated way. They can continue doing that exactly the way as they always have. A builder on a building site can write a request, a requirement onto a tile, take a photo of it, send it through on WhatsApp. We can pick up that, we can transform it into an order, and we can ship it into our commerce system that's already pre-integrated with our ERP. And we now have the ability to virtually guarantee adoption of our digital investments because increasingly customers don't have to change their behavior to use those technologies. So what are your two thoughts on those two approaches?
Number one, I agree with you. I think the new AI technologies are going to streamline processes. When we look at how a lot of our larger customers take orders, EDI is still the beast.
Yep.
Large percentage.
Yep.
Second one is things like punch out is still large within the distributor community. Then you've got things like calling the sales rep, email the sales rep, and unstructured format. And then I'll call this quasi-structured, where if I want to place an order with you, I have to go into my ERP, I have to create a purchase order, and then I click a button that'll send you a purchase order in a standardized purchase order format, right? As an attachment to that email. And then finally, you've got the someday will actually go on and log on and buy the item. So when we look at where things are going, I think punch out naturally flows into your e-commerce system. I think you've got something like those order emails may flow into e-commerce. They may flow directly into ERP.
Yep. I've seen both.
Or your CRM or whatever it is as a step along the way. And EDI is EDI. I think it's going to be around forever. Regardless, MCP and AI, whatever, EDI is there to stay for at least quite some time. And I think we need to understand how customers are using each one of those different channels. And the easier we make it for them to do business with us, the easier it will be for them to do business with us. And even if we're looking at those customers that are logging into a website, there are a couple of things that B2Bs require. Are you a certified business? Do you have pricing? Do you have tax exempt certificates? Are you buying on terms? Those are very friction-filled activity to get credit or to get your cert certificates online. Simple solutions of them. They're friction-filled processes. The less friction we can give the end customer, the more they'll adopt the solution, the more revenues it will be.
I think you make a really good point there, especially when, like probably greater than 90% of the manufacturers and distributors I've ever worked with, the customer always does and must originate in the ERP. It's a one-way sync of customer data between the ERP and the commerce system. But increasingly, businesses are wanting the customer to originate digitally in a self-service way. Now, that becomes a real challenge when you have credit checks and you have the application process, and certain brands require you to have a physical storefront to sell goods through, and there's a whole laundry list of qualification criteria for someone to become a customer of some of these manufacturers and distributors. And so it becomes a real hurdle. It's not like a retail website where you can go, okay, I'll give you your name and email address and physical address, and you're good to go. Make a purchase, put your card in Bob's, right? When we have credit assignments and all the other things that go along with this, it is a real challenge, and especially when we need to get proof of business permits and all sorts of other things. In Australia, you need ABN, and there's all sorts of different requirements, and it's all regionalized. And even within the United States, even within states, there's certain regional requirements about the business data you have to collect about them, right? And so that introduces a tremendous amount of friction just to onboard a new customer at scale, right? And to certainly onboard them originating in the commerce system, that creates a nightmare. But one of the things that I've seen an approach be taken to this is that effectively a customer can be created as a draft customer, for lack of a better term. Let's get them to create all their details, enter as much name, email address, organization, their role, maybe even they can even upload as attachment some files that we may need to receive from them. But what I see as a first step is oftentimes when that customer is created digitally through the portal as a first step, they can be assigned the least preferential trade price list, for example, that you have available. They can be just the standard prices. They're not going to get the ultra preferential price list because we don't know anything about them yet. We have no trading history. We don't know anything yet. So we're going to give them trade pricing, but it ain't going to be the super preferential pricing. Then we're perhaps not even going to give them a credit account initially. Maybe they can only pay via business credit card for that first transaction, for example. So we have conditional payment method support and payment method display depending on who the customer is, what we've approved them for, where they're at in their buying journey with us, etc. Hey everybody, unfortunately we had a few technical difficulties in the last couple of minutes of this particular episode of the podcast, so we had to go ahead and cut it off at that point. Hopefully you still got a fantastic amount of information and knowledge out of this last episode in our master series about B2B customer centricity. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. We'll wrap this all up together into a special playlist for this master series inside YouTube. And of course, you can check it out on all of our podcast channels. Thank you so much. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.